Thanks so much, Adrian. Thanks so much for Metro New York to invite me today to just talk about part of the overall marketing mix that's important to help brands win at shelf. I've been in the marketing media services business for many years, working with early stage and emerging consumer brands for a long time, mainly in food and bev, health and beauty, and personal care. And so what I've seen is while I work with brands that are looking to, drive website traffic, drive DTC through Shopify, drive Amazon and other marketplace sales, uh, normally you'll utilize a number of bottom of the funnel type activities, Meta, TikTok, social advertising, content development, SEO. Um, Obviously Amazon advertising and a variety of different things to help build social proofing, including public relations and influencer marketing. And so at a certain point, you're building all that social proofing, you're building sales volume, and very often you're trying to win at shelf by supporting either your first retail chain commitment, or potentially you've built some retail distribution over a couple of years. And at a certain point, you might be contemplating kind of a media plan to help build the brand, but also focus on how do you actually take advertising to be able to drive on-shelf conversion and sales lift at specific retail chains. And so that's really what I want to talk to you about today. Um, there's a number of challenges for emerging consumer brands. Obviously, getting on the shelf is a huge achievement. It's really just the beginning, though, because it's a big country. There's a lot of competition, both breaking through in terms of media and advertising, and obviously a number of brand challenges and competition within each retail chain. Limited marketing budgets are obviously, one of the huge challenges. High retailer expectations in terms of hurdle rates and, test scenarios where you're looking to drive certain number of units per store, per week, and per month. And obviously, awareness building, so you want to build awareness, but you also want to have a real sense of, media that's going to drive purchase behavior. In many cases, it's driving trial and actually converting on the shelf. So it's not easy. It's challenging. The way I look at digital shopper marketing, which is essentially utilizing programmatic trading programs and platforms to be able to reach the right people near the stores where you have distribution with the right message to break through the clutter and to actually provide some measurement to see if we can actually drive incremental sales lift for advertised versus non-advertised stores in a specific area. You can see by the sort of visual depictions across the right side of this slide, obviously category buyers are an important targeting segment. And when we talk about category buyers, it's isolating data that illustrates that a group of people have actually purchased in your product category over the last, call it 30, 60, or 90 days. So that's one really, really important metric. We want to reach people that are active buyers in the category. But the second piece is really, really important. So for example, if you're in a specific area where there's a Whole Foods and a Sprouts, let's just say, if consumers are loyal to a specific retail chain, it's kind of difficult to encourage them to visit a store to find a new product when they're not like a consistent shopper of that specific store. And so I'll talk a little bit more about it, but the idea is to make sure that we're reaching people that are loyal to that specific retail chain that we're targeting. And then the other thing is making sure that we're reaching consumers very, very close to where we know you have distribution, because consumers have so many different places that they can shop very close to their homes. We just want to make sure that we're making it as easy as possible and mitigate the risk for whatever ad spend that we're putting against a brand, that we have the best shot to convert. And when it comes to driving action, it's really important to think about creative, to think about the right kind of message. If it's a message of a new product on shelf, we might want to even incorporate the retail logo in the ad to make sure that you can capitalize on loyal consumers of a specific retail chain that might not know your product or brand, but might know obviously that retail chain that they shop in all the time. And so when we look at this, everything we're doing is very focused, it's measurable, and it's obviously built for conversion at shelf versus necessarily on website or at a marketplace like Amazon. Why this works for emerging brands, basically everything we're doing is focused on efficiency, um, making sure it's measurable, and making sure that it's also retail friendly. So what we find is you don't need a huge budget to make an impact, because when we start figuring out what our total addressable market is, and I'll get into that in a minute, we can back into, utilizing the right amount of impressions to reach the right consumers across a specific number of stores. When we talk about measurement, obviously we're talking about looking at data at the beginning, measuring, advertising performance throughout the campaign to make sure, again, we're reaching shoppers of a specific category. And finally, there's a lot to be said about looking at a media plan that actually is supporting a specific retailer. And so there's the opportunity to share custom plans with buyers before the campaign, and then potentially sharing what the outcome of the campaign was, so that your media plan is obviously supporting your brand, but it may often be supporting specific retailers, whether it's one or multiple retailers in a given campaign time period. So we feel like this is a really good approach. Takes a little bit of time, takes some effort, and so we typically go through a 5-step process to get ready to launch a campaign and activate and measure. Everything we're doing is focusing on, planning smart, spending wisely, and measuring as much as we possibly can. Step number one, essentially what we want to do is identify the priority retailers and analyze store level sales data. And so often, if you're already working with one or multiple retailers over, let's just say, the last 52 weeks, if I can get access to that store level retail sales data, I can start looking for trends, i.e., are there specific cities, states, or regions where multiple retailers are delivering really, really strong sales in a select number of stores. And so by doing that, we can create a media plan, but a media plan that's really focused on consumers that have the highest propensity to drive incremental sales lift. The second piece is we talked a lot about, building a specific custom target audience, right? So when we're looking at that category shopper, those retail loyalists, we start to build out a very specific total addressable market or universe across those zip codes and among that specific target audience. And so then what we can do is back into, again, trying to figure out what a budget might be to be able to reach specific reach and frequency parameters. And sort of in the old days of traditional media, reach and frequency were terms and measurement tactics that were very, very effective in looking at whether it's national, local, or regional. You could look at, how am I going to best reach, let's say women 25 to 54 nationally or in a specific area, look at TV and radio and magazines and sort of look at how we might be able to, spend the right amount of money in traditional media to reach people a specified number of times. It was very effective for many, many years. What we like about doing the same kind of analysis with digital is that, we've been able to really develop very scientific data sources over the last several years so that we can actually identify, let's just give you an example. Let's just say across, several retailers, um, we've decided we're going to reach 1,000 stores. So we've isolated stores that we believe have a high propensity, or consumers with a high propensity to deliver incremental sales volume. Um, we have the zip codes for those 1,000 stores. We know we're reaching whatever category it is. If it's snack food, it might be broader than, more of a niche product. Um, but basically, no matter what the retailers are and no matter what the category is, we have that sort of universe. Once we develop that, step three is setting the reach and frequency parameters just to get an estimate of, sort of the number of times that we'll be able to reach uh, a group of people that can, again, can hopefully have the best shot to increase sales performance. So a lot goes into it. Obviously, creative is really important. Potentially, you might want to look at a couple of creative tweaks so that you can measure in real time creative that resonates more with the audience, A versus B, essentially. Um, and then obviously, you're going to launch and optimize the campaign using software and AI tools that are built into the platform that help to deliver results. We typically like to give campaigns 90 to 120 days so that the platform can, again, be as smart as it possibly can be to reach the right number of people, the right number of times. And then at the end, obviously, we're going to analyze data and provide reporting and measurement in a couple of different ways, which I'll get into. So that just gives you an idea of sort of pre-planning, activation, and how we begin to think about measurement. When we talk about these audiences, right, and obviously it's important to reach the right demographic target. We want to focus on category shoppers, but I talked a little bit about connecting with specific shoppers at priority retailers. And what we're able to do is isolate data segments that where we know that consumers have shopped twice in the last 30 days at a specific retailer. And so there's a lot of different data providers and things that we can look at. But we really like this one metric because it illustrates that we know that a consumer that we're targeting has been into a store twice in the last 30 days. We don't need, we don't need the extremely loyal shopper that's been in a store, multiple times per week, for example. But if they've been into a store once in the last few months, it's not as powerful as twice in the last 30 days. So we typically focus on that. The good news about a program like this, whether it's natural organic shoppers at Whole Foods, Sprouts, and other retailers like them, Kroger and Publix for grocery, Walmart and Target mass, Ulta, Sephora beauty, CVS, Walgreens for drug. It's pretty easy to gain access to this retail loyalty data. In some cases, we actually have the potential to gain further insights and further data integration from retailer data itself. So, for example, in the platform that we're working in, we have some data from CVS and Walgreens, Walmart, and Kroger to help these programs be even smarter about targeting shoppers of those specific chains. So again, we want to make sure we're reaching, these campaigns are all about retail. So it's not just reaching shoppers of specific brands and products, but we want to reach them when they're obviously spending time in those specific retailers. So then what we do is we take all of that data and then we include the category information, whether it's snack foods, clean skincare, supplements, really could be any type of product that the brand is supporting. Talked a little bit about reach and frequency, right? So we've established the audience, we have the messaging, we're looking at that total addressable market or that universe. And then essentially what we want to do is estimate the audience size avoid wasting impressions, and really focus on a frequency level that is reasonable. So what I mean by this is what we don't want to do is focus on too little of a universe so that your frequency is too much, right? So we're basically spending too much money reaching too small a number of potential consumers. But what's really important is we want to make sure that we don't ramp up reach too much without the potential for reaching people multiple times. And so it's trying to find a balance. It's definitely an estimate. It's definitely an approximation. It's not perfect, but by using the tools at our disposal, we're able to figure out before we start a campaign what our goals will be, and then be able to measure what that reach and frequency level actually was after the campaign is completed. So again, it's that sort of combination of reach and frequency, and making sure that we can, stand out in that very defined universe of consumers that we're trying to reach. So what I wanted to do here is just provide a look at a couple of scenarios where this kind of approach might make sense. And essentially, it can affect, brands at all stages of growth. What we find is you might be launching at retail under pressure to provide, quick turns in that first 4, 6, 8 weeks. We also might find that brands that have had good success at a specific retailer might be having some challenges, whether it's in certain parts of the country, certain stores, or in general, we look at that as shelf defense. So we find that this digital shopper marketing approach can scale with a brand because if you can test in one area, you might be able to use this approach in a variety of different areas as the brand builds retail distribution. So on the top left, this is one idea is launch support. So the brand has been building. It builds distribution at Whole Foods, and Whole Foods has a number of different regions. So it's in 3 regions, and obviously the goal is get quick turns so that the retail buyer is comfortable keeping the brand on shelf and potentially expanding to all the regions, which can help trigger additional distribution at other retail chains. And so one way to be more conservative is to look at potentially identifying 50% of the stores in those 3 regions, running advertising against 50%, and then seeing how the advertised versus non-advertised stores perform, and then being able to scale into it once you feel that you've tested before you've invested, essentially. If you want to be more aggressive, you could go after all the stores because you recognize those stores were chosen because they're obviously, have a high potential for sales growth. And so it really, there's a number of different ways to handle this, but this has a lot to do with how something like this a digital marketing program could help support a brand new launch. On the top right quadrant, we're looking at a new product launch for a brand that's become well known at a retailer. So let's say there's a well-known brand at Kroger, it's done really well, and it's launching a new SKU. So a lot of the marketing, the current marketing, has been supporting the brand in general and the existing SKUs. And so what we want to do is identify that one SKU, identify the stores that it's in, and propose a program that is going to measure just the retail sales lift of that one SKU in very, very specific stores at, in this case, Kroger. These are just ideas. The bottom right is what we call shelf defense. So the brand, this is just another idea. Brand's been at Walmart, it's done great. And all of a sudden, through different competitive situations, other competitors on the shelf, potentially other brands spending in media, there's some challenges, whether it's in certain regions, certain stores, but you have the brand at, let's say it's at 1,000 stores, and all of a sudden there's a challenge. It's expensive. Walmart could have locations all through the country, and if you look at running advertising in a broad area, it could be extremely expensive when you're really trying to accomplish this one issue, which is driving velocity at those challenge stores at Walmart. And so again, we can go through the whole process, identify the stores, identify who we're trying to reach, back into the right number of impressions, reach and frequency goals, and we can spend a lot less money and try to really hone into that one very, very specific challenge. Um, on the bottom left quadrant, this is a little bit different. So these are some ideas around multiple retailer support. So let's say a brand, again, it's built its brand, social proofing, it's gotten distribution, but let's say it's at 3 or 4 chains. So you've built distribution, I'm just using round numbers. Let's say the brand is in 10,000 doors across a number of different retailers. Sounds like a big number, but likely there's not really strong ACV across the country. You probably have really strong distribution in very specific areas. And so again, if we can uncover what the commonalities may be between multiple retailers, we can look at, let's just say, 3, 6, 10 states that have a high volume of strong performing stores across multiple retailers. So this analysis can be really, really effective because, again, what we can do is potentially say, all right, we have 10,000 stores, but maybe 3 or 4,000 of those stores, 30 to 40%, are driving a really significant amount of volume. So why don't we fish where the fish are and potentially spend more of our dollars focusing on the highest performing stores that are existing right now so that we can generate incremental sales in those strong performing stores. So what I talked about up till now was more about single retailer support, but this approach can be really interesting because, again, what we're doing is essentially making the country smaller and really focusing impressions in a very careful way across multiple retailers. What's also interesting about this approach is you could take, again, a 3 to 4 month period. We could have a number of different retailers, and we can essentially have the same overall messaging. We're trying to build our brand and create interest and trial, but we have segments and packets of digital impressions being served to zip code bundles where there's stores in individual store chains. And if you can follow me here, what's interesting about that is we can have a general message. We can focus that message to retail loyalists of very specific retailers. And then we can incorporate potential TPRs, off-shelf promotions, end caps, things that you might have going on so that we can help drive traffic in the store when you have the best shot of converting at shelf. And so there are some complexities to these types of campaigns, but the good news is we're set up to be able to figure out these solutions and make it relatively simple for brands to be able to activate across multiple retailers. So again, that just gives you a little bit of a thought about 4 different approaches, just trying to share ideas high level about how something like this could be implemented. And then we talked a little bit about proof and performance and measurement. Again, obviously what we're trying to do here is drive sales across all stores in a chain, but we really want to focus on the stores that have the highest propensity to drive retail sales velocity. And so it's pretty simple. Once we have access to the store level sales data, we can look at sales lift in advertised versus non-advertised stores. And that really would be our sort of primary KPI. We also can't take our eye off the fact that we are building awareness among high value consumers. And so what we want to do is see, are people visiting the website through clicking through on banners, or seeing the ad and coming through Google search, or actually typing the brand URL into their browser. So there's a number of different ways that we can measure and see how people are coming to the site. We can advise on, are we illustrating how a consumer can look at a retail locator and see exactly where the product is available? Are we offering an e-commerce solution, either direct to consumer or driving to Amazon, Walmart.com, Instacart, etc.? And the last piece is, if we gain access to marketplace sales data, i.e. Amazon, we can start to learn, are we driving traffic to Amazon, for example, even though our primary goal is driving to the retailer on the shelf and or to our brand website. Some consumers may just see a message multiple times, we're reaching the right people in the right place, and they may go right to Amazon because that's their primary shopping partner, essentially. So the good news is there's a number of different campaign insights that we generate from programs like this, beyond just the sales volume increases. So what I wanted to do is just give you just a sample of a success story with a very similar program that I was just talking about in the last slide. And that has to do with a brand building distribution across multiple retail partners, but essentially very, very limited budget. So we want to find the right people in the right place. Um, and it's in the food category. And essentially, we had multiple retailers that we were tracking. And so along the bottom, you can see the good news is the brand was doing really well. And so the brand was up 17% in the time period that we measured across multiple retailers. So this is advertised plus non-advertised stores. So business was going well anyway. But what we did is we identified only the stores that we ran advertising in a relatively, um, you know, strong reach and frequency level. And we saw that across the multiple retailers, we found a 15% variance in store growth or store sales growth in advertised versus non-advertised stores. We also had one high priority chain where store growth was occurring in that year. SKU increases were occurring. So there was a lot of interest in seeing, can we drive extra lift within that one priority store. And we saw a 30% differential in advertised versus non-advertised stores in that core chain. And so it was deemed a success. We also saw a lot of site traffic increase and quality site traffic, in that we were able to measure the number of pages for an average consumer that visited the site. So we started to see that, maybe we tried to drive them to a shop page, but they also visited the home page or a number of different content pages within the website. And so overall, what we were able to do is model out what, maybe 2 campaign periods would look like, or could we increase the number of states and the number of stores? And so in year 2, we're in the process of greatly increased budget and footprint to be able to cover more and more of those high priority stores. So again, got a couple different success stories in different ways, but this one is the most recent. And I just wanted to close with, seeing a lot of different plans and talk to different brands about, what they're doing, because we only want to, execute plans like this when we think we have the best shot to win. Sometimes I may be very early, and I talk to brands, could be for 6, 12, or 12 months or a couple years. Sometimes I think there's a really good opportunity to win. And so just wanted to mention a couple of the things that I've seen when brands are developing that media plan, trying to go beyond the bottom of the funnel. And, if they're not careful, the spending is not as easily measurable. It's harder to track, and you may argue that, you probably shouldn't have spent it all. And so you have to be really, really careful. Number one is identifying that specific audience size. And that's why we like looking at, a smaller group of, whether it's states, cities, number of zip codes in stores, however we define it, we really want to understand what that specific audience size is. Um, really set the parameters of what we're trying to measure up front, so that we can have a test before we invest strategy. Uh, the other thing is creative execution. We always like to leave a little bit of time because sometimes messaging that a brand has utilized for different media channels doesn't exactly work here. We really want, quick message. We want to show that product. The product packaging is so important because that's what will resonate when a consumer sees it on the shelf. Incorporating potentially the retail logo, if we're working with a specific retailer, incorporating that TPR, or potentially having TPR creative during the sale and then going back to general creative when the brand is not on sale, things like that. The other thing is, and the last thing is really, again, finding that balance between the reach and frequency, see if it's been addressed, and see if, too many impressions were served to too few people or too few impressions served to too many people. And so we just kind of want to look at all of those things. And these are just a few things to consider when you're looking at a campaign like this. So basically, that's the story high level. I know there's a lot here. Some of the things I mentioned can get kind of complex. Everything's tailored and customized based on specific brand needs. But I just wanted to share just a different look about how you can sort of get beyond that bottom of the funnel and be very, very careful and really set yourself up to potentially be able to increase in subsequent years and be able to cover a higher number of stores and consumers that have the best chance to convert at shelf. So that's pretty much it. I wanted to make sure I left time for any questions, share any ideas, and I just wanted to thank everyone for joining me today.
Thank you, Rich, for that insightful presentation. As a former media buyer, programmatic is definitely the most cost-efficient way for brands to, I feel, scale. Very interested to hear from the group and see if anyone has any questions they'd like to answer. You're welcome to unmute yourself, ask it live, or drop it in the chat. And as everyone's thinking of those questions, I'm going to also share that as part 2 of this Media Week of webinars, we are hosting something with Broadleaf Digital on Friday on how to prepare for Amazon Prime Day. So I'm going to also drop that link in the chat. But for the purpose of this conversation, anyone?
Yeah, I'm not afraid to talk out loud.
Love it.
Rich, Steve here from Maple Valley Cooperative. We're a small maple syrup producer in Wisconsin. We sell nationally. What's the best spend for a brand under $5 million? And we have a complete mix of outlets from small retail, NCG, infras on up through ingredient business. What's the best spend for us at retail?
I mean, basically, it's a lot of it has, when you look at your 5 million in sales, I mean, what we've always found is that, brands and companies typically allocate, X% of their overall sales to marketing, right? So that's the first thing. And then within marketing, you have a number of different channels, right? Trade marketing, trade merchandising, consumer. So a lot of it is understanding the distribution channels. Is it only retail? Is it e-commerce as well? But the nice part about this approach, to be honest, is that we can look at what is a reasonable budget for the brand, for you, and look at a range, right? And then what we're trying to do then is back into number of stores that fit based on the profile of your stores. And what I mean by that is Having the zip codes and addresses of stores is really powerful for us. And I'll explain it, right? So the reason why everything's so customized is because if if you're distributed and sold in rural areas versus urban, right? So obviously two entirely different um, areas. So if you're in like Whole Foods in New York City, right? Um, the 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 uh, the number of people in a zip code in New York City is massive compared to a rural area. The good news about the platform and the data and the resources that I have is that once we plug in the zip codes, we have a good sense on what that population is. So typically, it's not so much for us what a budget should be, again, for a year, but it's more, could we develop a test over 90 to 120 days, right? And so we might give you as like a good, better, best, three options, right? Monthly spends, let's just say between, 15 and 50,000 per month for 3 to 4 months, just throwing numbers out there. But then we would back into um, how many stores do we feel confident that we can cover based on your exact store list once we have those zip codes. And then, we could look at, what number of months is appropriate, what impression levels, how many stores are we covering, because we'd almost rather look at, instead of asking what a media budget is to spend, we'd like to back into, can we make a difference at a smaller number of stores, try to, generate a win, give you an example of how it works so you can apply it to your business for the next couple of quarters and the next year.
I've
Hope
got
that
the,
helps.
yeah, it does. And I've got the perfect example already cooking up here. So that's great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, always happy to have a conversation, and it's relatively easy for me once I get the access to the information that we need to come back and give you an approach. I've been involved in more of larger media agency for a long time when it was we looked at more budgets across a year, um, almost like how much do you want to spend as part of your media plan. My approach is different. I'm like backing into like, less spend, being really, really careful, give you results. Never sure what they're going to be. The idea is mitigate the risk, give you the best chance to succeed. Then you feel a lot more confident to apply it to other parts of your business.
Awesome. Thank you.
Michael Deham, pitch contestant last week, did a fabulous job. I don't know if you're still in Korea, but I do see some of your questions here. I mean, Rich did touch a little bit about Whole Foods and driving velocity there, but is there anything else that you could share, Rich, maybe that
Yeah,
that
no,
could
I
also
see the
help us?
message. And Michael, we met briefly, and I love the presentation. And I believe you're headed to Korea right after that event. So basically, yes, you have 3 months show velocity, totally get it. You're at 100. Okay. So you're 100 Whole Food, whatever it is. So if we looked at, fine, we're at 100 Whole Food stores, um, and then those Sprout stores, so basically all we really need is to get the zip codes of those stores, understand a little bit about the brand, key competitors, who your ultimate target audience is, how things are going with social and segments that are successful already. Take all that information back into something and say, all right, if we want to target all of the stores and we want to do it for 90 days, right? Let's see what that would take. Come back to you and give you an idea what that is. Um, with a smaller number of stores like this, it's easier to cover all the stores versus, if you said I'm in a couple thousand stores, I might say, you know what, we should really look at our smaller percentage of them so you can test before you invest. Here, I realize that, you're in this Sprouts Innovation Set, you need to be successful quickly. So again, it's identifying the actual stores, put the right number of impressions only in those against those stores, and measure those stores and try to see if we can increase the units sold per week, per month. Once we do, we can let you know what that is once we get access to your store level sales data, and then hopefully, it can help you get additional distribution, and you can almost have this as part of your toolkit to look at how you might be able to support other chains as you build distribution. Hope that helps.